Hello, thank you for joining me. My name is Logan, I'm one of the creators of Siege Warfare, and I'll be your host for this first short tutorial. We'll be covering the basic rules and playing through the first half of a Siege Warfare game. I'll be selecting my deck of cards from one of the 6 ready-to-play customizable starter decks, available at siegewarfare.com. Today I'm going to be playing the Chamberlain deck, called Defending Gettysburg, and my opponent will be playing the Robert E. Lee deck, named Heart of the South. Now, at the beginning of any game, we're going to select one ground card and put it into play. You can think of the ground as your starting base. It gives you some powerful abilities and is usually key to the style of deck you're playing. For this first tutorial, I've selected Gettysburg as my starting ground. After you've picked your starting ground, go ahead and put it face down on the table so your opponent can't see it. It'll remain inactive and unknown to your opponent until the beginning of your second turn. This is largely so your opponent can't guess your game plan and start countering your playstyle before you've even begun. Shuffle your cards up and draw 7. We're ready to begin. The game starts with you having 7 cards in your hand. This is referred to as your opening hand size. To decide who goes first in a 2-player game, you can flip a coin or roll a die. In this tutorial, we're going to go first. Now, the player who goes first in a 2-player game has a shortened turn and begins the game with 1 debt. Debt has to be paid off before you can play units or ground. You can pay 1 debt by spending a surplus at any time. As for the shortened turn, the player who goes first only gets to draw cards and play a resource on his first turn. So we're going to begin our draw sequence now. Every turn you can base any number of cards from your hand before you draw. Basing a card is just taking a card from your hand and placing it under your field. That's your deck. You don't have to base any cards, but there's a big advantage to basing, because when you draw, each turn you can draw up to your opening hand size, 7 cards. If you already have 7 or more cards in your hand and you don't want to base enough cards to get below 7, you can only draw 1 card during your draw sequence. So we have some decent options here. I'm going to base barrage because we don't have any artillery right now. I'm also going to base one of the cavalrymen. Now, I don't have to draw back up to my opening hand size, but right now I want to keep my hand pretty full. So, let's see what we draw. Awesome! Chamberlain. He could really help us out mid-game and late-game. We have a really good mix of units available to us right now. Now, I didn't draw any resources, but that's okay. We have our resource token card. Everyone starts with the resource token card in play at the beginning of every game. So my options for a resource this turn are farm or currency. Farms are a slow play, but they really pay off in the long term. A farm gives you 1 surplus the turn you play it, and 1 surplus every turn after it's played. Currency is a big economy boost, but with no sustainability. Currency gives you 3 surplus the turn you play it. I'm going to go with a farm this turn because I'd like to see what direction my opponent is going with his army before I commit to anything. When I add a counter to my farm, it gives me 1 surplus this turn. I'm going to spend that surplus to pay off my debt, and then we're done with our first turn. Now, the player who goes second in a 2-player game begins the game with 1 surplus and dismisses 7. Dismissing a card is taking it from the top of your field and putting it into your discard pile. Okay, so it looks like he's going for currency. He's going to have a bit of an edge on our economy early game, but as long as we can hold out, we should be at an advantage late game. Hood's Texas Brigade. They're a powerful infantry unit with a talent for taking out ground. Neither player gets a combat sequence on their first turn, so we don't have to worry about Hoods just yet. He's got 1 surplus left over, but it looks like he's done with his turn. So, he's going to save that surplus for later. So the very first thing you get to do on your second turn is flip up your starting ground. That green orb at the top right of the card is a counter. It represents a level of exhaustion. Any card that has that symbol at the top right of the card means it enters play with a counter. The renew sequence on your turn is when you can remove a counter like that from each card you control. So the counter comes off Gettysburg and we'll be able to use its abilities this turn. Now remember, when you're removing counters during your renew sequence, you don't want to remove any counters from your farm. Your farm gets more resourceful as time goes on, and the more counters it has on it, the better it is. The farm we played last turn is going to keep providing for us throughout the game. It's going to generate another surplus for us this turn, during the renew sequence. This part of the turn is also when a player can use the Fortify ability on ground. Gettysburg has Fortify 4, which means at this time we can restock 4 cards from our discard pile to the bottom of our field. Now we don't have any cards in our discard pile just yet, so we'll move on to our draw sequence. I like most of the cards in my hand right now, so I'm not going to base anything. You can always draw at least one card. If you have 7 or more cards in your hand, you just can't draw more than one. So this turn, I'm choosing to draw a single card. I'm going to be a little risky here and play another farm. Now I'm going to play a unit. I think I want to play Buford's Cavalry because he's such an adaptable unit. But he costs 3 surplus. So I'm going to get that other surplus from Gettysburg. That's better. Now I have enough to pay for Buford's. Buford's Cavalry can alternate between a heavy cavalry unit and a ranged shock troop. Plus, mobility will come in handy to avoid that Texas Brigade. I'm going to attack with Buford's and keep him as a cavalry unit. Whenever a unit attacks, he must choose between attacking an opponent's field, ground, or battery. In this first tutorial, we aren't going to be addressing the battery, and his ground hasn't been turned face up yet, so it's not a valid choice. My unit is attacking his field. Buford's Cavalry has Raise 1, which means whenever this unit attacks a player, it inflicts 1 damage to that player. The game is won when all opponents are eliminated, and a player is eliminated when he has no cards left in his field. Okay, he just intercepted our cavalry unit with hoods. This means that Buford's damage is not going to my opponent's field anymore. It would be directed to hoods instead. Now, all things being equal, my unit would lose the battle against Hood's Texas Brigade. Hood's Texas Brigade has ranged, which means it inflicts its combat damage 1 sequence earlier than Buford's combat damage. If I kept Buford's engaged with Hood's, the 6 damage from Hood's would neutralize the 6 defense of Buford's Cavalry before he even got a chance to retaliate. But I've got mobility. When a unit without mobility intercepts an attacking unit with mobility, the attacking unit with mobility can withdraw. So in this instance, I can just withdraw during the retreat sequence of combat. When I withdraw Buford's Cavalry, he's no longer engaged with Hood's Texas Brigade, which means neither unit will be damaging each other anymore. It also means neither unit is a valid choice for most artillery abilities or battle effects. I'm not going to play any more cards at this point, so we're done with our second turn. So, he chose Fredericksburg as his starting ground. Fredericksburg has the best restock of all the ground in the game. That's going to allow him to take a lot of damage from us, and play a bit more aggressive without fear of losing the game. The Fredericksburg ability allows him to restock 4 cards in addition to its normal Fortify, so he's going to have his field back to full strength in no time at this rate. Plantation. Plantation is a resource card available to Confederate decks. It's better than a farm, but it takes up a spot in your deck and remains in play when you play it. Stuart's Cavalry is a big help when playing battle effects during combat. And now he has a mobility unit to deal with my Buford's Cavalry. Okay, so we're taking one raise from Hood's, and Stuart's Cavalry has me a little worried. But I don't want to take all that damage, so I'm going to intercept Stuart's Cavalry with my Buford's Cavalry. I'm going to keep Buford's Cavalry as a mobility unit again, not using his ability this turn. That's going to make it so Stuart's can't withdraw from combat. Hopefully he doesn't have an effect. Okay, it looks like we might be safe. I don't have any battle effects to change anything, so we're going to move on to damage. Once a turn progresses to ranged damage, no one can play any battle effects or use any abilities until combat is over. So we took 6 damage from Hood's, and our cavalry units both inflicted 5 damage, but it's not enough to neutralize either unit. So combat is over, and the units go back to full health. Before I begin my turn, I'm going to use Buford's other ability and restock 1 card. Meade, what are you doing in there? Let's get you back in the field. Alright, as we begin our turn, we get to fortify from Gettysburg. Okay, I want the effects back, and I could really use that Battle Cry or Chamberlain's Great Gate in my hand. War Bonds is also a great effect. And let's throw 20th Maine back in there too. The Renew sequence removes 1 counter from each of our cards, so we can use some of those abilities again this turn. We also get 2 surplus from the farms we played on the first and second turn. And at the beginning of your draw sequence, you have an opportunity to shuffle your cards. We're definitely shuffling this turn. I'm going to base this Cavalryman and the second 20th Maine. Here's some artillery, and good. We got a battle effect. We should be able to do some serious damage to his army on his next turn. This time around, I'm going to go with currency for my resource. I'm leaving Gettysburg available for now. I'm planning to use its taunt ability on my opponent's attack. Worst case, I'll just use it to generate a surplus on his turn. Now, as much as I want to play Chamberlain and the 12-pounder, I feel like I need some more defenders. I'm going to play 20th Maine and Iron Brigade. Let's see if we can do some damage. I'm going to leave 20th Maine back for this attack, because he's a bit too vulnerable against my opponent's units right now. I'm going to keep Buford's mobility again, and attack with him and Iron Brigade. There's the raise damage. Now Iron Brigade has a great ability for attacking or intercepting. If my opponent intercepts Iron Brigade with both his units, Iron Brigade gets a +2 bonus to his offense and defense. If he intercepts one-on-one, we'll probably see some units get neutralized. Okay, he's playing it safe right now. I'm going to withdraw Buford's Cavalry, even though there's a unit with mobility intercepting me. Hood's Texas Brigade does not have mobility. As long as there's one unit without mobility intercepting your mobility unit can still withdraw. The battle effect I have can only be played on my opponent's attack, so we're going to go ahead to damage. I am ready to end my turn, so I let my opponent know. If he has anything he wants to do before he starts his turn, now's his chance. Okay, so he's going with currency again. We're going to start really climbing ahead of him on our resource generation pretty soon. Alright, we're going to activate Gettysburg. I'm going to taunt one of those first corps. Hopefully we can get an easy kill. Now let's see how he wants to run with this. Alright, now's our chance to even things up. Taunting to my ground right now would normally be a risky play, because he has more than enough damage to take out Gettysburg. But we've got a nice trick up our sleeve. I'm going to use the ability on Buford's cavalry, switching him to a ranged unit with +1 offense and losing mobility. Let's double up on that Hoods and get him out of the picture. And I'm going to intercept one of the Longstreet's 1st Corps with Iron Brigade. And then I play Chamberlain's Great Gate on Iron Brigade. Chamberlain's Great Gate gives me 2 more offense and defense to Iron Brigade, but the real trick is the Protector ability. Protector allows Iron Brigade to intercept a second attacker. I'm going to also intercept the other Longstreet's 1st Corps now. Now, Iron Brigade is engaged with multiple units. That means his main ability is triggered, and he now is a ranged unit with 10 offense and 10 defense. He's going toe-to-toe with a total of 8 offense and 8 defense with those 2 1st Corps. We should be able to neutralize both those units and walk away with our Iron Brigade. He put out a rebel yell. We're still going to be able to neutralize those 2 units, but it's going to cost us our Iron Brigade. I might lose Buford's cavalry too. Remember, once damage starts, no one can use any abilities or play any more cards until combat is over. I better use that restock ability now. Alright, now we can move on to damage. So we're going to inflict 6 range damage to the 1st Corps with 6 defense, and 4 damage to the 1st Corps with 4 defense. It's pretty obvious in this situation, but sometimes how you inflict your damage affects which unit lives and which unit dies. Yeah, I thought so. He's taken out Buford's here. But keep in mind that all ranged damage happens simultaneously, so he's losing the Hood's Texas Brigade as well. Now, if I used that Chamberlain's Great Gate against the Stuart's cavalry instead of the 1st Corps, he would have been able to withdraw. This battle could have gone a little better for us, but we're in a pretty good spot. I think we can sure up the win in the next few turns. Alright, that about does it for today. Thank you very much for joining me on this first tutorial video. Remember to pledge to our project on Kickstarter. Even though this is a digital presentation, it's not a digital game. They're physical cards, and we need your help to print them. As always, thank you for your support, and enjoy the game.